My name is Jeff Raymond. I'm the Vice President of Software Product Management at Arista. So as Tom said, we're not new to Tech Field Day. I guess it was Tech Field Day 1 that we started with. I was talking to Andre. He presented at Tech Field Day 8, which was about, was it 3? That was about 11 years ago. So we've done a number of them. So I thought if we're talking about what's new at Arista, let's talk about it from a Tech Field Day perspective, because if we kind of go back the last 10 months or so, it actually paints a pretty good picture of what we've been up to, at least at the broader level. So back in July, we had Mobility Field Day where we talked about our campus solution, what we call the cognitive campus, wired and wireless approaches, and some of the details there. Then in September, we followed up with a focus on data center, where we went a lot deeper on network automation from a continuous integration perspective. So infrastructure as code, Fred Hsu, Doug Gourlay led that particular session. And then we had the very first service provider networking field day in December, where we talked about our cloud-grade routing solution and how, in fact, Arista has been investing and customers are using us outside of the data center in routing roles, especially in the edge of the networks. And so some of the approaches there. And then just recently, in March, we had the security field day, where we talked about our NDR solution, which is from our Awake acquisition, and how we brought that technology into our campus switches, and as well as expanded some of the visibility and observability capabilities with our advanced monitoring fabric. And so here we are today with the agenda that I talked about, which is kind of back to the data center roots. And so I think the takeaway here is, a lot of people still think of us, Arista, as the low latency company that we started out as and got our foothold in. And then, of course, our core business is still data center networking, but really we've expanded much broader than that in terms of campus, in terms of the edge routing roles, in terms of security. And this actually paints an interesting picture for that. But one of the things that I'll point out is the core philosophy of the company and how we build our products really hasn't changed over really more than the decade that we've been doing this. And really the philosophy is about, if you would have talked to us back in some of those early Tech Field days, we would have talking about building the best software, using and leveraging merchant silicon and the curve that has enabled, talking about using open standards network designs and building repeatable design patterns, talking about automation and making the software extensible to really making automation become a reality. And then, of course, supporting all of our customers as best we can, but not only through partnerships in terms of what we build, but through our TAC and the approach we have for supporting our customers on the post-sale side. And so really, this is a slide that is true today as it was, really 10 years ago. So what are some of the other things that we've been up to that don't actually just map perfectly to a Tech Field Day? We've had a couple recent announcements. One of them is expanding to the commercial, the mid-market space with our integrated wired and wireless solution that we call the Cognitive Unified Edge, or Q. So we announced this in March just recently. It really ties that wired and wireless capabilities, really focus on a more simplistic deployment model with new edge threat management capabilities that we've moved into that. And we're planning on bringing this to a Tech Field Day in the not too distant future. Just last week, we had the NAB show in Las Vegas, focusing on media and entertainment. And this is where we brought together a lot of the efforts we're doing for our customers that are moving to IP-enabled broadcast. And so we have a new app called the Media Control Services that runs on top of CloudVision that helps enable some of the integrations and the customers that are operating their broadcast equipment across an Arista infrastructure. We have capabilities that we've talked about with our advanced monitoring fabric and how we bring observability together with our security products like Arista NDR for customers, especially some of the use cases we've highlighted recently have been in the web production app environments. And then automation. It's kind of this spectrum of automation. Sometimes we talk about automation, we're talking about the turnkey approach for someone that's just looking to move off the CLI. Other times we're talking about people on the other end of the spectrum that are talking about doing it themselves and building it themselves, and really everything in between. Right? And so we really want to continue to enable that. And some of the stuff you'll hear today is how we are working with some of the largest customers. Our Cloud Titan customers are still our largest customers. But what we do for them is something that we try to leverage those principles, leverage those philosophies, but offer them in other shapes and sizes in terms of packaging for the broader customer base. So one point that one theme that I think you'll pick up from this particular session today, and I mentioned it a moment ago, but just to kind of put a finer point on it, is multi-domain and how we are approaching networking from a multi-domain solution perspective. The concept is, networking and probably vendors have been kind of responsible for building solutions that are very pointed, that are solving a particular problem. And so when we think of the data center, one of the value props that we had when we started off was a single EOS that ran across all of our switches. Well, that's true today, but even back then when it was just the data center use case, that was a valuable component for our customers because they understood that the software they were running could be certified once and then run across all those devices. And so the operating cost was reduced for those customers. But as we've expanded to multiple networking domains, whether it's the campus, whether it's the interconnect, the edge, the enterprise WAN, those value propositions only get greater. And so when we're looking at our products today, when you'll hear from Ken and Andre and Paul and Hugh, is we're really looking at software being that normalized plane for all the boxes that sit underneath of them. The boxes are still important, right, in terms of the densities and the speeds and the feeds, but really software can bring that operational consistency that allows our customers to not reinvent the wheel as they move from domain to domain. And so some of the things that you'll see are things like, how do you handle a P-cert comes out? How do you react to that? Well, one way to respond is better than 10 ways to respond if you follow. Similar certifications and all the other really operating day-to-day tasks that our customers and network administrators have to work with. So